traders, to our post-week market review. So jumping straight into things here, as you can see, overall price has been bullish. We'll go to the start of the week, which will be right here. So this is the original candlestick that opened up. Obviously, we spoke about this in our last technical analysis. We spoke about sort of like this zone here being one of our points of interest. The reason why we marked in this zone, if you remember from our last technical analysis video, is because we understood that the range for this entire, the volume for this entire sort of range, this push since this initial move, this initial bearish move took place, we noticed that was most volume was within this area. So we knew that the price was going to be determined overall, the overall bias of price was going to be determined in and around this level here. And as you can see, starting off the week, we saw a nice bullish candlestick cleaning through these previous highs, which is what we expected to happen and what we anticipated in our last technical analysis. So as you can see from there, price continued until we made the most recent all-time high at 4,060. So price now has officially made its test at that sort of ceiling at around 4,000. As you can see from there, price did sort of drop down a little bit, and then we saw price push up to test that same sort of rough area as a next high. However, price then saw a bearish drop throughout the Thursday, and then since sort of Thursday throughout Friday up until market close, we have seen some low time frame bullish movement, as you can see, sort of creating those higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, higher highs, higher lows, then obviously finishing at a new higher high. As you can notice, the chart is relatively bare at the moment. So one thing I do want to do is I want to sort of measure this entire range and just sort of get the rough gauge of where the most volume was within the market at its different areas. So obviously, as you can see, most of the volume for this entire sort of week has sort of been in this middle section here at around 3,892. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and just decrease the opacity slightly on this, just so it's not taking up too much of the chart. So bear with me while I do that, just as we want to be able to see what we're actually doing, so you guys can get a rough idea of why I'm marking in certain levels. So as you can see, this rough area throughout the middle is the main area of volume. So if we go ahead and sort of mark this level, and we'll mark it in the sort of gray that we have been marking, these sort of supply and demand areas. So that's our first level that we want to take into account. We're going to measure another level and see if we have a rough sort of another place where the market's volume was the most. So again, measuring sort of this initial move here, I will actually drag that down all the way up and just until the high. Okay, so that confirms us that most of the volume that we did see for this entire week was at this area here. As you can see, price pushed itself all the way up, creating that new all-time high. Okay, that solidifies that sort of level. Now let's measure sort of from this bearish move all the way down. Okay, solidifying it again for us. So most volume was within this area. So this is definitely going to be seen as the most fair value area within gold. Right, what we're going to go ahead and do now is we're going to go ahead and mark in the rest of our sort of support and resistance levels just based off of what we can see on the eye. We're going to go ahead and extend these right, and we're going to have these in our standard purple level. So the reason I've marked in this level here is because we originally found a resistance at this level, and then price tested it as a support sort of multiple times. So that's an interesting level for us to take into account. Moving on up, so left to right, bottom to top, moving on up, obviously we now have our next level here. You could potentially mark in a smaller level there, just showing you sort of a lower time frame support and resistance. For example, if I go ahead and zoom out, you'll see a little bit more of what I'm talking about. You can see that price did test at these levels, sort of resistance and support multiple times. So we'll definitely keep that one in there, sort of just as a rough point of interest. Then obviously we have our highs that were actually tested a couple of times. We'll try and mark this up as neatly as possible. And then obviously we have sort of this section here. So we have roughly a nice sort of supply area right here, which price has just sort of pushed above or with or slashes testing within. So with that being said, that's going to be our new points of interest marked in for the current area that we are inside of. Overall, since obviously the start of week, price has been bullish as we expected price to make a rally and test somewhere near that 4,000 level. As you can see, price did in fact do that. Once we saw price sort of hit that 4,050 level / 60 level, we saw price come back up to it again and then test it one last time before we then saw a market correction, dropping price down to this sort of common area of support. So what you can see as of recently, if we go down to our minute 15, what you can see is you can see that we obviously had this initial drop down and then we've sort of been moving sideways. However, then we've been pushing up, creating higher highs, higher lows, and higher lows. So with that being said, we're going to go back to our hour one and just sort of have a look what we could expect to see next week. So if price is to clear this level that it is currently sort of testing above, if we see price sort of clear this level here and rise above around 4,020, we're going to go ahead and expect that price is going to make another test at this previous all-time high. However, there is of course the possibility for price to reach this level and test it as a resistance, indicating to us sort of a break and then a retest pattern, and we could see price act as a strong resistance at this level, and then we could see price drop back down. So these points of interest are going to be the main areas in which we're taking into account our overall bias for gold. So we're going to be looking at what the market does upon market open, what price does upon market open. What we could potentially see is we could see price sort of drop back down. We could see some consolidation through these levels throughout the start of the week. But I do definitely think we most likely will see another test of that all-time high. However, it does just depend on this sort of level here, and then obviously the supply and demand area. We can expect next week, if we do see price enter within this area, price is going to sort of become very volatile, as a lot of people will see fair value for their short and long orders. With that being said, as that level is probably known to a lot of retail traders out there, and obviously the big traders, bank traders, etc., we could potentially see when price does come down to this level with the amount of orders that are injected into the market, we could see liquidity grabs. So we could see liquidity sweeps where we grab previous or lower resting liquidity levels. So what would that look like? So sort of let's sort of put ourselves into the institutional traders, so banks and sort of whales, hedge funds. So like they know that a lot of players are going to be getting into this. If price comes back down to this level, they're going to be taking a lot of buy orders. The overall bias for the market throughout most of the time frames, including the highs, is going to be bullish. So what would the institutional traders do if they saw they had a lot of retail traders that were entering buy positions? They don't want them to make money. Obviously, that's their aim, to take out as many retail traders as possible. So what are they going to do? So the most traders are going to enter at this level as a long position and most likely set their stop loss below this low here, expecting sort of if price does go ahead and drop down to this level, we're going to see price completely sweep it. However, the most likely thing that institutional traders will do, again, the banks or just big players within the market, is they'll recognize that loads of traders are entering positions at this level, for example, long orders, and they will establish that people will most likely set their stops below this previous low at 3,970, and of course this low down here at 3,941. So what would they want to do? They would want to take out as many traders as they possibly can. So what they possibly could do is they could create a fake out opportunity here where loads of buyers enter in the market. They push price up. Price comes back to this level of around 4,000, and then we see price plummet, sweeping past this resting liquidity down here, perhaps coming down somewhere around the sort of mid 3,900 area, before price then makes its initial move and creates a new all-time high. Obviously, for the institutional traders, that's going to go ahead and take out all of the buyers that will enter on this level, based off of fair value and supply and demand. So with that being said, that's going to be our post-week market review. Again, in conclusion, the overall market has been bullish once again, created a new all-time high of around 4,060. We have actually surpassed that ceiling that we expected price to react at 4,000. Price recently dropped below that throughout the Thursday session, as you can see. And then as the Thursday session came to an end and we crept closer into that Asian session, price has become bullish once again. And we are testing in and around this level of around 4,008. Overall bias for the market is going to continue bullish as we can see price action and candlestick structure on the higher time frames continuing to stay strong, unless we see some bearish divergence in the next coming days. The main level for a bearish flip that we're going to be looking at is this level of 3,945. So if we see price drop below that level, then we could expect price to come back near to the 800s or perhaps even the 3,700s. So with all that being said, that's going to be our post-week market review. As always, I hope you've all enjoyed. Don't forget to hit that like, comment and subscribe button if you haven't already. Join our VIP, visit our Telegram bot at GSIO admin bot. Drop us a message and we'll be sure to help you out with a subscription. Once again, hope you've all enjoyed. This has been our post-week market review, and I will catch you in our midweek technical analysis video. Peace.